So thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to run through our P6-Scrubber tool. We've got a new version with a few new features. So Sue will touch on some of that as she runs through the presentation. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald Associates, and I'm joining you here today from Calgary. And doing the heavy lifting is Sue Familia, coming to us from Wyoming. And she's an implementation specialist here with Emerald and has been doing project management, business controls, etc. for many years. So she's going to do the deep dive into the scrubber. So we're going to show it live. So let's touch on why we put together P6-Scrubber. So we put this tool together probably towards four years ago. And we were using it ourselves. It was sort of our own tool for the beginning. And then we morphed it into a tool that, because some of our clients wanted it, which made perfect sense because some of the struggles that we have with P6 is if we're not in a shared environment, meaning all the project participants are in the same schedule, which quite a few of us don't have the luxury of that sort of setup, you're dealing with importing. And when you're dealing with importing, you could get data from other databases that starts to collide or conflict or even just sort of mess up your existing database. So that's the common struggle that we face. So let's ask a quick question. How do you deal with bringing projects in from outside? Okay, so if you want to answer, you can. And we will be sending out actually our polls from 2022, some of the data. So we do share this data from all the webinars. So if you want to answer that, go ahead. So some of the typical is you bring it in and you clean it up in a cleaning database. So some of our clients have two databases, okay, which takes more work to maintain. And if you're in a cloud environment, you have to pay a considerable amount for that in many cases. So there is a cost to that, maintaining it, etc. Some people, and this is not a good idea, but some people go into the XER, which is like a text file, and start editing it. Okay, that's dangerous. We've seen some very big mistakes made in doing that do corrupt and do damage to your database, and it violates some of your licensing and maintenance with Oracle. So you do need to think about whether that's a good approach. And then some import right into their main database and clean it up. Okay, so we're seeing a few different answers here, which is expected. Okay, so these are all things that take time. You can make mistakes, and it can be pretty frustrating. So this is partly why we built P6-Scrubber. Now, P6-Scrubber lets you import not only XERs and XMLs, but it also lets you import Microsoft project files. So that's a newer feature we added probably 6 months ago-ish to the tool. So the idea is we want to keep our system clean. We don't want it to be polluted. We don't want our reports to stop working because something collided or something additional happened to come into the system. So these are all reasons why we built this tool. Now, I'm going to ask another quick question here. How much time do you think you spend cleaning up each month? Okay, now this is going to be a very broad range. Depends how often, how many projects you have, of course, and then how often you're importing. But we have some clients that are importing upwards of 40 projects every single month, and some are doing it every 2 weeks. So it can be considerable, just depending, again, on your situation. So the idea of this tool is to save you that time. That is really why we did it, and frustration and, of course, the potential to make a mistake. That's really why we built the tool. That's why we build all our tools. And we usually build them for ourselves as consultants, and then we decide, well, we can't consult with everyone in the world. It just doesn't make sense. It's never going to happen. So let's get these tools out so other people can do it. So that's really been the strategy for all of Emerald's tools. So how does it work? Let me give you a quick overview and then we'll turn it over to Sue to show it in action. You import the file. The file can be one file or many files. Okay, so if you have 3 XERs from one company or multiple companies, you can pull them in at once if you want to. You don't have to, you can. And then you have a definition that you set up with all the criteria on how you want to clean up these projects that are coming in, these XER files, XML files, or Microsoft project files. So you set up a definition. Now, we also clean some of those things that have been kind of plaguing us for the last few years. They're starting to get better, which is good, but you might still have POBS data that is hanging around, which makes your file very big and slow to import, etc., and risk types, okay? So we do get rid of that stuff that can be very problematic. You check data such as calendars, okay? So Sue will touch on calendars and how important they are to get right. You can then check other more common data, user-defined fields, codes, cost codes if you're using that, or if you're not using it, you can block it if the person importing it, company that created the file is using them, so you can block them. And then we have other validations, because some of our clients wanted the ability to critique the quality of the data, not the quality of the schedule, the quality of the data very quickly on what's coming in, because they had very strict rules because they have a portfolio that they're trying to run and they need all the schedules to have commonality. Okay, so this allows you some validations, things like project IDs, project naming conventions as well. So let's go ahead and I'll turn it over to Sue and she will do a deep dive on how it works. So I'm just going to switch over to Sue. Coming your way, Sue.
All right, got it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning. I'm going to share my screen here so that we can kind of take a look at first of all, what a database can kind of end up looking like when you don't clean your XERs or XMLs before they come in. So I have a pretty old database here that's had a lot of importing without any scrubbing, if you will, involved with it. And the first thing that we see can kind of be problematic are your resources. When your resources are imported in, you don't necessarily have control as to where they're going to land in your resource dictionary. You can see here that I've got a whole bunch of resources that are kind of just not detached. They're not under any kind of hierarchy or anything like that. And these came from an instance where a project was imported and it didn't have any hierarchy with it. And so it just brought in all these resources with no home, if you will. So that's one thing that can happen. Also, as they're coming in, perhaps you have similar ones that are the same thing, but they're set up differently. You could have some collision there when you're bringing those in. So this would be a way to kind of keep this a little tidier. In the way of calendars, when you bring in a global calendar, one thing that you could possibly have occur is that you may have a calendar that's named the same. Most databases have this standard 5-day work week out there. That standard 5-day work week is one that is delivered with P6, but that doesn't mean that a company can't go in and alter what the definition is from what it was delivered. If you have a project that's imported with a calendar at the global level that has the same name, that definition of that calendar will overwrite your definition of the calendar, which could potentially cause some problems when you're working with your schedules that have that calendar applied. Also, you end up having a whole bunch of calendars that perhaps aren't necessarily needed in your database overall. So we have the ability to roll that down and to make it at the project level where you can maintain that calendar for that schedule, but you're not overriding what your definition of maybe a calendar is with the same name. So you can see that we've got just a ton of calendars out here that we don't necessarily need. So, maybe these CEI and the CHPs, those are obviously not something that our company in this database really needs to use. It looks like these have been imported from other databases. So we have the ability to roll those down. Another problem that you can run into is, and these are just some of them, some food for thought. Um, in some of the cases, you may have global activity codes that come in. And again, what that's going to do is it's going to come in and it's going to put stuff in your database at the global level that you don't necessarily need. And if you can roll those down to the project level, again, you can maintain those for that schedule, but you don't have to import it into your global definitions for your activity codes there. So that's some of the things that we have the ability to handle, and of course much more as well. But these are just some of the things that you can kind of see might pollute your database, make it a little messier or a lot messier, as the case may be, as you're going into working with some of these items. So I am going to be working in a different database. And so I want to just make sure that I'm logged into the proper database here. And so that we can take a look at some of the items in there too as well. So while that's loading, I just want to, let's take a look at P6-Scrubber itself. So P6-Scrubber is a web-based tool. So you will have an URL to access that's going to allow you to launch the tool. Now, as with the majority of our tools, you do have the ability to hook it up to several different databases. So if you have several databases that you work with and you do want to do scrubbing for those databases, you can point these to different databases depending on where you're working. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and sign in and just kind of give you the lay of the land in the Scrubber tool. So we have some subject areas that come in and that we can work with. And so in the case of projects, we can handle comparing an ID or a project ID or a project name. So for those companies who have certain specifications for those types of items, this will validate and let you know if that project ID or that project name is adhering essentially to your policies on that. We do have codes in UDFs, the same at the activity level. We have resources, so we can remap those. We can deal with codes, user-defined fields, as well as units of measure. We can handle those calendars, and a few of these other items, which I'm going to go through in detail as we go along. Now, if you are building a definition from scratch, let's say you want to set up a definition for a particular client that you are receiving files from, and that's either XER or XML files. The first thing that you want to do is that by default, these modules are turned off. So you would want to enable them, and then you could go and you could manually start adding information to these. So I'm just going to use the example of an activity code in this case. So I would add the activity code. I would name it, and I would put a scope in. If it is a project level activity code in this case, I would put a project ID. I would want to select an action of what I want to do with that. Do I want to keep it, or do I want to remove it from the file? So in this case, I want to keep this vendor activity code at the global level. With P6 or Scrubber, we can either deploy this standalone where you don't have any connection to a database, but the majority of our clients want to have it hooked up so they can see what is going on with that. So see if they have it in their database. So what I can do is I can actually go into this new area, and I can see if I actually have a vendor code. And you saw as I typed in that I had several, and I could select which one I want to map it to, so to speak. So they're going to match up in this case. Now, not only in the case of codes can we handle the code name itself, but we can actually handle the dictionary as well. So we can compare that. So in this case, when you're adding those manually, sometimes we have very large dictionaries for our codes. Sometimes not, and it might not be too bad to add them individually with our plus sign. However, if we did want to add a large set or a large dictionary, we can open up this bulk edit, and that's going to give us an area where we can actually handle setting up those particular codes or those dictionaries. So I'm just going to use a dictionary that's in my database here. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to go into my activity codes. And I see I have my vendor here, and I'm just going to flip it so that I can see all the values. And what I can do is I can highlight all of these. I can copy them, and I can take them back over into P6-Scrubber, and I can paste them in. Now, I could also do this with an Excel sheet if you happen to be creating a new dictionary or something of that matter. You could do that as well. Now, when I bring it in from P6, it gives me a header, which I have the ability to remove when I import that in, because we don't want this to be a value in there, that code value description and color. I also don't need that color, so I can choose to remove that particular column. And then when I apply it, it's going to populate my entire area here. So again, I could go through and I could say whether I wanted to keep or scrub. I could also go in and match this up as well. And then I could also choose the proper definition for it. So once I've done that, and I've handled all of these, then I have my entire dictionary set up, as well as my code itself. So I can do that on any of my user-defined fields, resources, map, whatever. But an easier way to kind of start setting up your definitions is to import a file that you already have from that client. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to blank out what I just put in there as my example, and I'm going to import a file that I already have from my client. And I'm going to take a look at actually what's in that file so that I can build my definition around it. So once it comes in, I can apply, and I can see that this is what's in my file so far. So first of all, I'm going to take a look at my project codes. So I have some project codes that are coming in. So I want to scrub these. So I'm going to enable this module. And I'm going to, take a look at what's going on with the data for these project codes. So I can see in my district that because I'm hooked up, it's telling me that I have a match in P6 that's called district. However, I do have an issue with this one because I have that a yellow yield sign there. When I hover over, P6-Scrubber is going to kind of coach me and tell me where I have items that are not matching properly within that piece of data. So in this case, it's telling me that I have a dictionary validation that's not matching. So I can open up my little plus sign here, and it's going to show me the values that are in this particular file. And I can see that I have this DIST5 that isn't matching what I have in my dictionary for my district. So what I can do here is I can go and I can blank this out, and I can go and I can see, oh, we call it D5, not DIST5. So I can select that. And once I select it, it's telling me it matches. And what this is going to do is it's going to remap this value to D5 so that I'm not creating new dictionary values in my district item here, my district code. Now we can also handle user-defined fields. So with our user-defined fields, again, oh, and I did not visit this very quickly. Let me do that. We do have the option as well that if I don't have the data defined in my table down here at the bottom, and in maybe a subsequent XER or XML, I have a new project code that shows up. I can choose to actually scrub that out if it's not defined on my list here. So if it comes in and I have a project code that's not on my list, it's going to remove it from my XER. So I am not going to bring that in mistakenly. I also have that option at the dictionary level as well. So if I want to allow new codes to be brought in, I would keep this blank. Or if I want to keep that dictionary as it is, I would select this option, and it's going to scrub out anything that's not defined here. So user-defined fields. Again, you would want to enable your module. And in the case of when it's not defined in my table, I can go and I can decide at what level do I want additional user-defined fields to come in. Now, in my database, I don't use WBS user-defined fields, so I really don't want any other ones to come in at all. So I can mark it that if any additional do come in, I want to scrub them out. And in the case of my WBS subject area user-defined field here, I can choose to actually remove that from the file if it comes in. Now, in the case of this submittal date, I do have it there. However, it is not, in this case, it's not the same user-defined field in my database that is defined here. We actually have another user-defined field for a submittal date. So what I can do here is I can go in and I could say, okay, I have this SCR submittal date. This is where I actually want to land this one. So I can choose it, or I could add a new one if I needed to. And it's going to map this submittal date to this SCR submitted date or submittal date. It's going to rename it essentially. For my codes in my for my dictionary, or my codes in my dictionaries for my activity codes, I do have one additional option here, and that is this roll down option. And if I choose, let's say on this mitigation, I wanted to go and I wanted to actually take this and roll it down to the project level, I could choose this option, and it's going to take this global mitigation activity code and it's going to roll it down to the project level, to the project where it is actually being used. And so now it will become a project level activity code instead of a global one, and pollute up my global activity codes. Again, user-defined fields are the same here. with the exception that I do have that ability, again, for those different subject areas that I can choose to remove as a blanket or not. Now with resources, what I can do here is I can do a number of things. So first of all, of course, I would enable it. Now you saw those resource dictionary dictionary values that came in that were all lined up at the bottom that didn't have a home per se. What I can do with my resources is I can actually expand this out and I can decide where I want to land those resources. What parent do I want to put those resources under? So I would set it up in P6 and then I would choose it here, and it's going to, when it imports those, put it under this parent resource. So I can keep my resources kind of tidy, kind of organized, and knowing where each one of those resources are going to land when I import them. Now, let's say in the case of one of my resources here, let's just take the barricades because that's what we have. Let's say it was mistyped in the database that's coming in for me. And I'm just going to go ahead and alter this here. When that happens, it's going to come and it's going to tell me, it's not finding this in P6. You don't have a match here. So in this case, if I were to want to add this, and of course I wouldn't because it's misspelled, but if I did want to add this as a resource in my dictionary, and this holds true for any of the items, the data items, I could go in and I can select this and acknowledge that, yes, I realize this is not in my database right now, but I do want to add it. And then I can say, okay, it's going to give me a blue star to indicate that I have allowed this, and it's going to import it as it appears in the file. So I can do that with a number of these here. So if I wanted to maybe remap my engineering or something like that, let's say I want it all under civil. I don't designate in my database any of my drafting and things like that. I just call it civil engineering. I can go in and I could remap this to that civil engineering. And then I could do it more as an overall resource to just take a look at engineering. I don't need to break it down into drafting and leads and things like that. I just want to consolidate it up at that civil engineering level so that I have a roll up, so to speak, instead of having them all separate. Codes and user-defined fields work the same way as they do at the project and activity level. Now, I also have the option of handling my units of measure. So most of the time, if we're using units of measure, we have a defined list of units of measure in our database. That doesn't necessarily mean that somebody sending us a file has defined them the same way. And we can see this as in this M3 here. So obviously cubic meters, but we don't have it defined as a small m and a 3. We actually have it defined. If I go in and I can see it doesn't match because I have the red X, I can go in and I can say, okay, oh, ours is a capital M with a 3. And we don't call it M3, we actually call it cubic meters. And so I could remap that so that I can kind of keep my units of measure clean and have a constant list so that when things are defined, they're defined in cubic meters, but it uses the abbreviation that my company is using. Now, calendars. As I described before, most everyone has the standard 5-day work week, but it doesn't mean that it's defined the same. I don't want that to overwrite my standard 5-day work week from a client. So what I can do is I can choose to roll that down to the project level. So it's going to take that global calendar, move it to the project level, still maintain that calendar for that schedule, but it's not going to overwrite mine. In a lot of cases, we have clients who just roll down every calendar every project or global calendar that comes in, just so that they don't have that collision and they don't have that addition of calendars at the global level that you're not going to want to use. Now, I have these ones defined, but what if I have there's another global calendar that gets created that's used on a project that comes in later on with this same client? I can also choose to roll down any additional global calendars. So it's going to handle that without having to redefine this area here. At the project level, we had a client who wanted to actually just see what was at the project level, what calendars reside at that project level when they're importing it. This was for validation as to a calendar that was required to be used on their projects. So where we don't have any action to be done on these calendars, we can actually see what's there, and we can analyze them at that point. So this is an informational piece. We also have the ability to handle our project or our resource calendars. So let's say I have this coming in as a standard 5-day resource only, but I have a different one that I want to map it to. I actually want to map this to my SCR standard 5-day resource only calendar. And so I can remap that here as well. Now, one of our new features that we have just added is handling notebook topics. And this particular file does not have any notebooks involved with it. But if it did, it would bring it in, it would give it a name, or it would have a name. I could choose whether I wanted to, and let me just add one really quick. I could choose whether I wanted to keep that notebook topic in that notebook or whether I wanted to scrub it out. Or perhaps I have a notebook topic that it maps to, and then I could choose that as well. It is going to identify what level that notebook is assigned to in the file as well. And it's going to give me that matches P6. So this is something new that has just been added by the request of a client again. So we do try to keep up on these tools as we're going to make sure that they're relevant to the people who are using the tools. So we take feedback and we incorporate that feedback, if it makes sense, into the tool itself. Now, in the case, let's say that I wanted to remove an item because I added a line here. I added a line to my table. In the case that I wanted to remove this, maybe I've added it by mistake, I can simply use my trash can and remove it from my table. So you're not set and you don't have to start over if you've defined something in error. You can actually remove it and either redefine it or just completely get rid of it. Now, roles are handled much the same as my resources. So I can, in this case as well, land those in a role tree. So I could go and decide where I wanted these roles to land so that I don't have a bunch of random roles in my role dictionary. I could land it under a parent, and then I could go and define these accordingly, whether I wanted to allow them to come in, whether I wanted to remap them to something else, etc., and handle each one of my roles as well. I can also handle cost accounts. So in this case, my cost accounts look really good. I already have them defined. They have the same definition. These look fine. So I can allow those to come in. I can choose whether if I have any cost accounts that are new, what do I want to do with them? What do I want to not allow those to come in to my database, or do I want to go ahead and add on to what I already have in my cost accounts? My final, let's say, stick handling of my project, or my file here, is I can put a new OBS. I can define a new OBS in this particular file. Now, what this is going to do, when you import a file and you have it defined as a client's, or wherever you're receiving it from, an OBS that is not yours, it's going to actually add that OBS element to your OBS table and assign that responsible manager to the project that's coming in. Well, you don't necessarily want to do that. You don't want to have additional responsible managers that are available out there. So what you could do is come down. You could find where you wanted to set the responsible manager to, based on your OBS structure. And then it's going to go out and it's going to change that. So when you import it, it's already going to be assigned a responsible manager of what you chose here in this this default parent OBS. Now, this last piece here is called a simple scrub. Now, what this enables me to do is that, let's say I don't need to stick handle absolutely every piece of information in my file that I'm receiving. Maybe I just want to prefix it. Maybe I want to prefix my code, all of my codes with a prefix, so that I know what it belonged to. And this might be, if you want to prefix it, maybe it might be the company that it's associated with, or something of that matter. You can add a prefix. You can also add a common separator. So I would want to put SCR and then a dash. And then I can choose which ones I might want to add that to. Now, in the case of my global activity code, maybe I don't want to mess with any of the globals coming in at all. What I want to do is just roll them down. I can choose to roll those down as well. So let's say I want my resources to come in with that prefix, my roles, my resource code types, my calendars. I don't want those to come in with a prefix necessarily, but I do want to roll all those calendars down. Maybe my UDFs I want to prefix, my roles, and my resources. So this is going to go out. It's going to put a prefix on those particular data elements, so that when you import them, you can identify them. Now, in the case of resource shift and curve, maybe I don't want any additional ones in. I can choose to not import those pieces of data. So this is why we call this a simple scrub, is because you can handle these and you can have them handled kind of as a blanket, rather than handling each one individually. Now, when you're done defining what you need to, you would save the definition so that you can scrub your file. This also will allow you to use that definition over and over, so you don't have to redefine it every time that you go to scrub a file. So I would save this definition by clicking this Save and Load down here in the lower right-hand corner. And I would, this is new, so I would save it as, and I'm just going to call this my example definition. I could put some notes about the definition if I wanted to have notes show up underneath my definition when it's saved. And I also have an option of what level to save it at. I could save it personally for just my use. I could make it, if I am an administrator, I can make it a global definition so that anyone who uses P6-Scrubber could use it. Or we have this option for teams. So let's say I have a particular team that handles all the ABC contractors. schedules as they come in. I could actually assign that user in P6 to that ABC contractor team. Then I could save, as an example, this one to the ABC contractor. And then those users who belong to that team are going to be able to see that definition as well as use it. So you can kind of compartmentalize some of your definitions if you would like, to different teams, so that they know that these are the ones that are, say, the one that they should use for that ABC contractor. Now I'm just going to save this as a personal definition. Once I have this all set, I'm going to apply, and it's P6-Scrubber is going to go out and it's going to save it for me. And it's actually going to show me up here in my green bar, my definition that is applied at the time. It's also going to show me my last project that I imported as well. So when I have a definition that's defined already, and I log into P6 and I want to use that definition, all I would do is go into my Save and Load Definitions area. I would choose the definition that I actually wanted to use to scrub a file that's already been defined, like that, and I would say load that definition. So it's going to go out, it's going to take that definition, it's going to apply it in P6-Scrubber. And this will allow me to now scrub files with it. So I can scrub the files by clicking the Scrub Files area. I would browse out into where I have my files. And let's say I have 2 files or many files that are coming in for this, that need to be used on this same definition. I could choose each one of the files that I want to scrub at that time. And of course, it's going to line them up here, and I could just kick it off and say I wanted to process both of those files in this case with this definition. Once my definition has been applied and it has been scrubbed, I can go and I have some options here. And the first thing I probably would want to do is view the report, find out what happened when I applied the definition to this particular project or this particular file. When I click that, it's going to open up a report for me. And that report is going to tell me everything that happened both at a summary level here when P6-Scrubber was run on this particular file, as well as it's going to give me some detailed information. So in the case of my project code and my dictionary validation here, I can see that some changes were made. It says not clean. And the gray boxes are tables, are telling me what my definition was defined as. And as I scroll down, I can see what's happened with my file and what changes were made. So in the case of my district, I didn't have anything scrubbed out in my project codes. I didn't have anything remapped, but I did have a dictionary change in my district. So remember, I had my district 5 that I remapped to the D5 value that was already in my dictionary. And it's telling me that it's remapped. So it's going to give me some detailed information. In the case of my user-defined field, that WBS one was removed, and my submitted date, my submittal date actually in this case was remapped to submitted date. So I can see that very easily, and it'll give me that for each one of my modules that I ran in my scrub. If I'm not satisfied with that, I can go back and X out, and I could go and I can alter my definition to actually do what I want it to do. If I am satisfied with it, I can then download the results. So when I download the results, I'm going to get 2 files that come in. I have my clean file, my clean XER in this case, and I can tell that it's clean because I have a date and a time that it was scrubbed. And I also have a copy of the report that we just looked at. So if you wanted to give feedback, maybe to a client or a contractor that perhaps you had certain specifications that they were supposed to adhere to, and that didn't happen. You could copy and paste parts of this report. You could share the entire report to them, what have you, right from here without importing that schedule. So once that is completed, of course, you're going to want to import that into your P6 database. And I already have imported this one here. This one is the XER that I imported. I also had an example where I had done an XML, because we can handle both. We can also handle XMLs from Microsoft Project. Now, those don't have a whole bunch of information in there. In fact, if I have time in just a moment, I'll load one. I'll import an XML into P6-Scrubber, but they're very limited in the information that is in an XML file from Microsoft. But you can handle what is in there and make sure that it doesn't collide with something in your database. So when you import, you have user-defined fields, some indicators that are going to show you kind of at a high level what was handled in your scrub when you scrubbed it. So I can see that in the case right here of my project code, I had some changes in my project codes. I also had changes in that dictionary. So that's indicating that. I can see that in my district code that I had, that it did map to a D5, and everything looked okay with that. I did have some UDFs that came in that were scrubbed and were altered, as well as a schedule status code indicator. So that schedule status was also altered. I can also see that at my activity level. So it's going to give feedback at my activity level. So I can see that my vendor code was clean. Looked like that one came in really, really well. On my work type, I had some that came in well. It looks like it's also warning me that it looks like that I've got some that were not set. They were blank. And so it's indicating that here for me. It's also on my discipline here. It's telling me that this was probably a new value that was added. So it's alerting me of that. And it's also alerting me to the fact that I have some blanks. I have my activity code or my activity user defined fields, and I had some changes in those. So I might want to check those, make sure that everything is okay. And then my cost codes came in and they look like they're good. Now, also at the project level, I have that a notebook that's been created. And that notebook is essentially my report that has come in, and I have that. And so it has maintained that information for me so that it can be referred back to, maybe in the case of a claim or something like that. You can show that no data was altered per se, other than renaming what that data actually was defined as. So that could be helpful in a claim to show that that nothing was altered when that was imported there. Now, the idea of P6-Scrubber is to keep your database clean. So we do have options here in our general area. If you do not want that notebook file to be created in your scrubbed file, you can turn that off. You can also turn off the creation of those indicators. So if you choose that you do not want to have those, they are on by default. But if you choose that maybe you don't want those indicators to be created and therefore not be created in your database, you can turn that off. We also have the ability to override the file version. So in the case that maybe you're sending, because the tool is not just meant for people bringing information into their database, It's also meant for those who are going to share XERs and XMLs out to others. So you could be scrubbing out some things that you don't necessarily want someone to see that you're sending your project to. You could use it in that manner. Maybe you're sending it out to somebody who does not have the same version of P6 that you have. You could actually demote this to, I work, this is a 21.12 file. I could demote this to 19.12 so that when it scrubs this file, it will demote it to that version, and whomever is going to import it, whether that be my database or the database of someone that I'm sending this file out to, they would be successful in importing that file at that lower level, because P6 does not like importing files from or from higher versions into a lower version. It will give you an error. So that is something that we can handle as well. So what I don't know if I have handled everything. I think I have. Do I have any questions that I need to?
Nope, not right now. I
Okay.
don't see any questions, so I think
Okay.
what you were showing was pretty clear. And you touched on the point I was going to bring up, that for contractors, so what you do is you export your file, then you bring it into Scrubber, clean up anything you don't want to send out to your client, and then you've got that covered. So it saves a lot of time from a contractor's perspective as well. But you touched on that, so perfect.
All right. Then I will hand it back to you to wrap things up.
Okay, great. I'll take back control. Oh, okay. Sorry. I think there was actually a question. I didn't see the pop-up. So let me just take a look. Do we have to install it on our PC, or we should make account online in P6-Scrubber? Okay. You could do it either way. So we have P6-Scrubber in our cloud, but if your company prefers to have P6-Scrubber installed inside within your own environment, that's also an option. So we sell it both ways. Now, in terms of how we sell it, in terms of pricing, so we sell it on a load basis. So it's per project that's loaded. So when you get the tool, you can share it with 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever number of schedulers. It's sold on a per project basis. And we have bundles of packages. So if you do a lot of scrubbing, probably the unlimited per year would probably make more sense. So we have a bunch of different packages to try and make it economical and cost effective. But the thing that we found is the amount of time that it saves you is quite considerable, especially if you're doing a lot of scrubs. Okay, so that's how we sell the tool. Let's get back in and do a wrap up. If you have more questions, throw them in and we'll tackle them as we go. Okay, so we took a look at the tool and how it works. You saw how we do pretty much all the different pieces. And newer to the tool is the notebooks, notebook cleaning. I don't know if I missed anything else. Let's just see. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap up. And one more quick question. Are you going to share the presentation? Yes, we will. So I did record it. I didn't forget. And so you should have that available probably in the next day or two. So thanks for spending the last hour with us. Hopefully you saw something that could be useful for your team, save them time and frustration, and also just the potential collision into your reports. Okay, more and more of our clients are using P6 data. In our case, we put the data into our data warehouse, which is part of our P6 reporter tool, and they're reporting out to management, to leads, team leads, etc. in other systems like Power BI or Tableau. So making sure your database stays clean so that you can do that on-demand reporting is really important. So this is one of many tools that we have for P6. So if you're finding that there's probably some areas where you can improve your processes in P6, take a look at our website. We've got a lot of different tools. So we've got P6 Loader, which lets you push and pull data in and out with Excel. And it's virtually all the data. So if you have big lists of equipment, it's going to save you a heck of a lot of time. We've got updating tools. So we've got our barcode scanner, our TAPS tool, which is the fastest way to do any updating. So if you have big schedules, if you work on turnarounds, this is an awesome tool to get updates done so quick, much quicker than anything else out there in the market. And then we've got another updating tool called CAPS. So that's more for a capital project. So those are some to look at. And our P6QA lets you critique your own schedules. So it's a self-critiquing tool. It's not a third-party add-on, expensive, just designed for the lead scheduler. It's a self-critiquing tool. And you could also critique schedules you receive. So we've got a lot of tools. Take a look at that. And next week, I've got my P6 calculator tool. So if you wanted to do more resourcing and costing in P6, but you're worried about how much work it could be, take a look at that webinar, and you'll get some ideas on how you can even do more with P6. So let's just see if there's any questions. Okay, I don't see any at the moment. So